Okay, so we've got a tutorial here on the Volca Modular. Volca Modular is a semi-modular synthesizer that features 8 modules and a 16-step sequencer. The synthesizer is inspired by the West Coast synthesis approach. So according to perfectcircuit.com, West Coast synthesis is an approach to musical synthesis and electronic musical instrument design developed by Don Buchler starting in the 1960s. West Coast synthesis favours experimental approaches to making music, often bringing into question the nature of a composer, performer's interaction with their instrument, as well as the rules by which music is organised. So many say that West Coast synthesis hinges on the use of complex oscillators, wavefolding, low-pass gates, and dynamic depth FM. And that adds up as if we look at the modules, we see we have an FM style oscillator setup with a carrier and modulator. We have a fold function and modulation and ratio. Other modules included are Woggle, which is like a sample and hold. We've got these 2 function, which are like envelopes. And we've got 2 low pass gates here. A split, which is like a mult, and a space reverb effect, and a utility function. So I'm going to start off and explain the sequencer, and then we'll look at the actual modules and patching and all of that stuff. Pressing the play button will start the sequencer running, and then from there you can start exploring the different functions. So the sequencer can store up to 16 patterns in memory, and to access a slot you just hold the memory button and select one of the slots. So here we can see our 16 slots, and if we select 7 for example, and then you've got something in there. So if you want to make a new sequence, you'd pick one of the slots, clear it out, and start again. And we'll look at how to do that in a minute. We've got a scale function, so this lets you quantize the sequencer to a scale. So if you press function and 1, this will light up the available options, and then you can choose one of these scales here. So we can see we've got chromatic, major minor, harmonic minor, melodic minor, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, exotic 1 and 2, Japanese, minor and major pentatonic, and then reverse. So if I just pick minor, and then I'll pick exotic, you can hear it slightly changing the pitches. So next we have micro tuning. So this allows you to adjust the pitch of each note in the selected scale. So pressing function 3 will bring up the notes on the keyboard. So that's the edit of the micro tuning. This is each note of the scale, and you can select which note you want to edit, and you can then use the micro tune dial, which is the amount dial. It doubles up, and do adjust that by either plus or minus 100 cents. And then it will just let you create a more customized scale based off the one you're using. Then we have the octave up and down, so that just lets us change the keyboard octave. Next we have a randomize section, and we can randomize the notes in your sequence, the active steps. We can also randomize the micro tuning. So if I press function and 9, we'll hear the micro tuning. And you could keep pressing it. Let's randomize the notes. And so you might just keep pressing that until you randomly generate something you like. And next we have gate, and you have the option to have it long and short is default. Turn lower. And we can hear we've got a much longer gate now. Next we have mode, so bounce makes the sequencer run back and forth instead of repeating from the start every time. So let's give that a go. We'll turn bounce on. You see it goes back. It's kind of like Knight Rider. So then we have stochastic mode, and this one essentially randomizes every note. So in the manual it says in stochastic mode, at each sequencer step, the next step will be decided randomly among 4 choices. So it could either go 1 forward, skip 1 forward, 1 backwards, or repeat that same step. And each time stochastic mode is enabled, a different probability will be assigned to each choice. So pretty much you enable it and then it's just going to do a bit of randomization based on those rules. So if we take bounce off and turn that on, and you can sort of see it jumping around a bit randomly. Okay, next we've got motion, and that basically is going to let you record automation on any of the dials. And there's also an option there to clear your automation that you've done. So for example, I could turn it on. It is already on. And then what you do is you press record, and when you play, it's going to record any movements you make. So you can hear there I've just recorded the space effect. So that's pretty useful. And you can then clear out any active step settings you've got, or just all settings, which will just clear and reset the entire sequence so you can start from scratch. And you see I can clear everything, and now I've got nothing, all the settings are taken off, and that's how you would start from scratch. Okay, so next we'll look at recording. So with most Volcas, you have either live recording or step recording. So live recording is very simple. You just simply have to press play and then arm it to record, and then you simply just start playing in the notes that you want. Come out of that. Okay, and the other one is step recording. So to step record, you need to press function and the record button. As you'll notice, it says step record underneath that, and that's a secondary function. So we'll just hold function, press step record. You'll now see the record button and function flash, and step 1 is flashing. And essentially it's waiting for us to enter a note for that step. So we pick a note, and now you see it goes to step 2. And you just keep going. So you pick a note for each step. If you don't want to put a note in there, if you just want it to be a rest, you can press the play button and it will go to the next note. And then you pick what note you want. And you just keep going until you get to 16. And then you can play your sequence. My previous recording is still in there, so that's not exactly what I entered, but it would have overwritten the notes that I did from my live recording. So that's a good way to edit maybe one note that you want to edit. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the modules, as that's probably what you're more interested in, and how we can use these included patch cables to start making our own little patches. So first of all, we just want to look at how everything is routed by default. It's important to understand how the signal is passed around, as this will make it easier to make your own patches. So if you look at the front panel, you can see how each module is connected by default. If you look closely, you can actually see these lines that are showing how everything is connected without any patches of your own. We can see that the output of the oscillator goes to the input of this low pass gate, and we can see how the output of the low pass gate goes to the space out, which is the final output. In order to hear the sound of the oscillator, we have to open the gate to let sound through. So this is done by playing a note from the sequencer, which sends a trigger to the sequencer module, which is this one, and then the result of which is sent to this function, which acts like an envelope. And then this goes to the low pass gate into the second input, and then that opens the gate depending on how we set our attack and release, and it lets the sound through, and then we hear it. So if I change the release time, we can let the envelope have a longer fade out. So the Volca modular comes with this handy card which shows you all the patch point connections that are available. If we look at the key, we can see that the inputs are transparent and the outputs are in blue. We can also see audio signals have a rounded edge, whereas CV control voltages are square. If you're new to modular, the basic idea is if I want to modulate a dial, so for example, if I wanted to modulate this dial that I previously recorded with the motion, I could use another module's output to send CV messages to this input, which would be kind of the same as me manually turning it up and down. So if I take the Woggle output, for example, so this sample and hold module will be sending kind of a voltage amount which is varying. So it might be like 0.1, then it will go up to 0.3, up to 0.7, and this dial essentially responds to that if we plug in to the actual level input. So if we look at the card, we can see that the amount is an input, is the second input on the space out. So we can come out of this smooth Woggle output and modulate the amount of that reverb. So let's give it a go. So you get your little patch cable and just plug it in to that Woggle output, and we'll go into the amount. And if we play, you can now hear that the reverb effect is coming in and out. So what I'm going to do now is go through each module, but at the same time try and create some simple patches to demonstrate the kind of things that you might want to do with them. Hopefully if you stick with me till the end, you'll get an idea of how everything kind of connects together and how you can start to rewire and create your own patches. So let's go. We're going to start with the sequences module. So this module is the interface to the internal sequencer. The pitch output is the pitch of the current step. The gate signal is sent to the gate output when a note should be played for the current step. A gate will also be sent to the other outputs according to a gate counter. So we got a fourth once every fourth gate, a third once every 3 gates, half, which is once every 2 gate. The clock offset input, which is here, can be used to modify the sequence's tempo by plus or minus 20 BPM. So let's have a little go at a patch. So we could send the third output to the Woggle trigger. So currently the Woggle, by default, it just gets triggered by every step. But if we do this, it will only be triggered on every 3rd step. And then we could use the output of the Woggle to set some sort of level on the space effect. I'm not sure what patch I've got going on here. Let's just reset things. Okay, so what you can hear is that the space effect, there you go, will kick in when it gets a high enough value from the Woggle, but it's only happening on every 3rd step. So there you go. Okay, so next we'll look at the source module. So this module consists of a pair of triangle VCOs, voltage controlled oscillators, one called the carrier and one is the modulator. The signal generated by the modulator is used to vary the frequency of the carrier. This process is called frequency modulation, FM. Frequency modulation allows users to create sounds with very rich harmonic content and often with a metallic characteristic. So the output signal is then passed through a wave folder circuit controlled by this fold knob. which inverts the wave shape at certain thresholds in order to further increase the harmonic content. So we can have a listen to that. And you can definitely hear that metallic sound they're talking about. So additionally, the oscillator's overall tuning can be modified holding the function button and using the ratio knob with a plus or minus 50 cent. So these are analog oscillators, so things like room temperature can actually affect the tuning of those, so quite useful to be able to fine tune if you are having issues with that. So let's just show you something you can do. So you can just hear the sound of each of those VCOs by literally connecting them straight to the output. So you can take the output here and we can go straight to the space out. And I believe that's the carrier. Let me have a quick look at the card. And that is the carrier, yeah. And let's hear the modulator, which is a lot lower tone. Okay, so you can actually hear what the source sounds like if you connect the output of the utility into the level of the gate. Essentially, you can permanently open the gate, because now what you're doing is you're sending the value of C, and I can just turn that up. And then you can actually hear now what this sounds like, and we can play around with it. And there's another little trick you can do where you can use the second function, essentially make it loop on itself, because it has an end trigger, and it essentially has like a trigger out and a trigger in. So if you connect those to each other, it kind of is like an LFO, like a permanently oscillating thing. And then if we take the output of that, like say the positive output, which we're going to look at in a minute, and then if we connect that to say like the modulation dial, we turn C up again, now we can play around with this envelope. And we can just sort of get an idea of how this is going to sound. Okay, let's put an end to that craziness. So now let's look at the functions. So this module consists of two distinct function generators, which are often called envelope generators. So the first one on the left is an AHR generator. Essentially, that's got an attack, hold and release. So this is a three-phase generator. As I just said, attack, hold and release. It generates a signal that rises according to the attack time at the start of the gate signal, holds until the end of the gate, and then falls for the duration of the release time. When the release time is reached, a trigger is sent to the end trigger output, which is what we just used on the other one. The second one is a rise and fall generator. And this generator only has two phases, rise and fall. The shape determines the balance between the rise and fall time, that's the top one, whereas the time determines the overall length of the rise-fall cycle. When the cycle ends, a trigger signal is sent to the end trigger output. So, by connecting an end trigger output to the module's own trigger input, the rise-fall generator will start looping indefinitely, allowing it to be used as a continuous modulation source, like an LFO, which is exactly what I just did. So we'll do that again, and what I'll do, we'll play, let's just play something. And again, I could use this to modulate something, so we'll just go into, say, the space effect again. So I'll take the positive out, and we'll go into there. So you can see it's being randomly triggered there by the result of this. Okay, so next we'll look at the low pass gates. Now, the first one is used by default, the second one isn't. So these are two individual low pass gate circuits which consist of the combination of a low pass filter and voltage controlled amplifier. So the level input determines both the gain of the input signal passed to the output, but also the frequencies that are let through. So this means a high level will give a loud and bright sound, whereas a low level will give a quiet and muffled sound. So the maximum cutoff frequency of the low pass filter is determined by the cutoff knob, but this also is controlling the actual level of the amp. So it's like an all-in-one type thing. So let's send the modulator source, VCO, we'll send that to this second gate. So let's get a cable. So we'll come out of the modulator and we'll go into the audio in of the low pass gate, and then we need to be able to trigger that gate to open it. So we can just use the positive output of function 1 and we'll go into the level, and if we play, you can now hear that we are hearing each individual oscillator at the same time, and we can actually use the ratio dial to tune that oscillator, and you can do something like a fifth. So I believe that's a fifth. And what we could do now is we could actually modulate, say, the mod dial. And we could turn this one down. Okay, so next we'll look at the Woggle. So this module is a sample and hold circuit that defaults to sampling a pink noise source. A sample and hold circuit samples a voltage when triggered, and it holds that voltage until triggered again. The sample input can be used to override the noise source and sample any signal. Every time a trigger signal is received on the clock input, the value of the sample input is remembered and sent to the stepped output. The smooth output will look similar to the stepped output, but changes of the value will glide smoothly instead of jumping immediately to the next sampled value. What we could do then is we could take the smooth output to the function 1's release. So let's do that and go into the release of function 1. And then we can use the modulation oscillator as a noise source. So let's come out of there and let's go into the top one and let's play. So what you can hear is it's affecting the release time, so we're getting random release times. Okay, moving on. So next we'll look at the utility function. So this module allows you to combine and attenuate signals in various ways. C is used to attenuate input B, and the result is then added or subtracted from input A. All inputs can either be polar or bipolar, and both controlled and audio signals are supported. Additionally, when there are no connections to input B, it defaults to 3.3 volts, in which case a fixed voltage offset can be applied to A by controlling the value of C. So, as it just said, we can send either audio or control voltages to it. So, I wonder what happens if we send both audio oscillators straight into it. So, we'll connect modulator into A, we'll get the carrier into B, and we will connect the output of that straight to the output. Crazy. So the result is just a very distorted, overdriven oscillator, on that one at least. So now let's look at split. So this module duplicates an input to two different outputs so that a signal can be split and connected to more than one output. Using this module backwards is also possible, in which case it becomes a passive signal mixer, combining two control or audio signals into one. So really it's just a case of if you wanted to double up, say, the pitch output from your sequencer, and then you could go into one of the split inputs, and now you're going to have two pitch outputs. So we could send one of those pitches to, say, the sample and hold, and then we could take the pitch again, the other pitch out, and we could go to something else. So it just makes you know, you can just use something twice instead of once. It doubles up your output. Okay, so obviously we've got the space out. This module applies a digital spatial effect to the input audio signal and outputs the audio to the headphone jack and the internal speaker. The output can be used to patch the resultant audio to another input. And I've used it a bunch of times already, so I'm not going to do another patch on that one. So now I'm just going to do a bunch of random patches and just show you some of the sounds I can get out of it. So one thing we could do is create a portamento effect. So by using the Woggle smooth output, so what I can do is take that smooth output and put that into the pitch input there. What's currently happening is we're just basically sending the random voltages of the output of the sample and hold / Woggle into the pitch. So we're getting loads of random pitches. If we want to actually have the same pitches that our sequencer is sending, we can just take the pitch out of the sequences module and we can put that on the input of the sample and hold. So then we actually now get the same pitches, but with the portamento effect. And that sounds a bit more like it. And we can try and create a loop whereby it will just oscillate by itself. So earlier we created kind of a LFO by looping function 2 to itself. But what we could do is we could try and loop both the functions together. So I could take the end trigger of the second one and put that into the trigger of the first one, and then do the reverse. And now we just have it looping on itself. So it's no longer receiving a gate input from the sequencer, it's receiving it from this loop we've created. So from here, I don't have any pitches because it's just playing one note at the minute, but I could take the sample and hold out and go into the pitch input of the source, but we need to trigger the sample and hold to get new values each time. So I could take one of these outputs and use that to just trigger it, and then it should produce different values. And now I can use the time dial to control the speed of it. Now I don't have to take pitches from the sample and hold. I can just still play the sequencer, because although the gate will not be triggered by the sequencer, it will still receive pitches. And I could take some of these gate outputs from here and maybe use this to just randomly trigger the fold. And now we kind of get like an accented note. And this is pretty much it. You just sit and you experiment, you plug things in, you try and think of what things might work, or maybe you just randomly plug things in and see what happens. It's all about experimentation, but hopefully this has given you enough information that you can start experimenting with some idea of what you're actually doing and make sense of it. So as always, thanks for watching. Please like if this was helpful to you, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. Helps the channel though. You've probably heard that a million times. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one, and I'm just going to have a little jam now.